A lot of people say that first businesses fail. I don't know what that means really, but maybe this was our first business that failed. I said okay, Chris, what do I do now? When you are so invested in something, time, money, energy, you feel like you should make it work. In order to build what you want to build, you got to obsess over the smallest thing. People like to ask me, when they see me, so how's it doing? As if in your first year of being an entrepreneur, you should be successful, have revenue, maybe even be profitable. I think the better question is, in this episode, I'm going to share more about my own reinvention. And I know that word sounds bold and sexy when you're in the thick of it, but for me, it was a whole different ballgame as I was reinventing myself. And it wasn't just going through that whole Careerquake and trying to figure out my identity, but also so many other parts of my life just required me to look at myself all over again. It was 2023, and I think it was around May, and my best friend Helen, she was visiting and we were celebrating her birthday. We had a glass of wine and I said to her, I'm part of this club and they're asking me to consider starting a community of senior women, and I don't know if it's going to be my thing and should I do it or not. And basically she just said to me, look, if somebody's going to build Chief, which is a private network in the US, also in Europe at that time, somebody was going to do this for Asia, it's got to be you. And so that planted the seed in my head to just go yeah, okay, why not me? I let it percolate and I sat on it for a few months. And then I was in France. I remember sitting on the train and I had gotten into the wrong carriage. So I couldn't get to my seat. So I ended up sitting on my suitcase. And I think this is the beauty of when you're not thinking and then all your ideas come to you. And that's when I charted out all these different companies that I would build out under what is now called the Elevate Group. And so there was 15, 20 boxes that I drew out and I put it all in my phone. I had this vision of uplifting millions of women around the world through the Elevate Group. It started with a private network. It would evolve to many other things, elevate the girls, elevate the community, elevate the research, just all these things coming together. So that was when the first ideas of Elevate formed. I did a soft launch. I did 2 soft launches here in Singapore for the private network. I invited people. In one of those soft launch, Jingjin, who is now my partner in the Elevate Group, came and she was so thrilled that somebody was going to build this for Asia that she said, oh, I was part of Chief when I lived in the US. She did a whole brain dump on me on a call that we had and gave me all sorts of ideas. I sat on them and, a couple of months into that, it evolved as any ideas would. I asked her if she would want to come and build this with me. I didn't know Jingjin. And my other best friend, Yana, she was like, who is this person? Why are you asking her to be your partner? Have you done your research on her? You can't just ask strangers to build businesses with you. So she was like, what's the chop on this woman? I was like, I don't know. It's just my gut. I'm just going to go with my gut. I have no idea who this woman is, but I have this feeling that I'm supposed to build this with her. So I'm just going to pull the thread on this one. And, Jingjin and I met in 2011 when we were both named top 10 boys on LinkedIn for gender equity. And as usual, you check out who's the other 9. And we did not know this then, but I think we were most impressed by each other out of the other 9. So long story short, Jingjin comes on the journey with me. Obviously, we had a lot to work on. Personally, we came together and that's kind of how the Elevate Group formed. And I gotta say, this whole idea of the private network, we spent a whole year on it. I think we were quite arrogant in that, here I am, right? I've ran over $1 billion, 48 markets, 800 people. I know this shit. I know how to run a business. Jingjin had an exit. She's a, multi-company investor. She's built her own as well. So what could possibly go wrong when these 2 people come together? And we spent a whole year down the path of the private network only to figure out at the end of it that it was not going to be a model that will stack up, nor was it something that we really found joy in, contrary to what we believed in the beginning. And so one of the entrepreneurship myths, people like to ask me, like when they see me, so how's it doing? As if in your first year of being an entrepreneur, you should be successful, have revenue, maybe even be profitable. In hindsight, I think the better question is, did you put into place the right activities in order to get to the right set of learnings so that you can pivot in year 2? And so if we look back, yes, we lost a lot of money, which we're recovering. This year, we spent stuff on things we didn't need because we were so convinced with this idea of the private network. And then we had to roll back, look hard at ourselves and say like, okay, we need to pivot and pivot quickly. And so let's test the next thing. I think the privilege that we both have is that we didn't need the money immediately. So this gave us runway to test and give ourselves like 3 years to test a digital model. When year 1 testing it and it seems to be working. So now we're going to keep going down this path. I think there's so much to be said about the stuff that you read that you just go like, that ain't happening to me. And then it happens to you. And so it's when you got to really eat the humble pie and just go like, okay, that's okay, move on. And sometimes when you're so invested, especially money, and you put a lot into it, and this was part of my severance pay that I put into it, you feel like you should keep going at it until like beat the horse until it wakes up and rides, right? But we decided to leave that horse alone. And I think we are going to come in a few years back to the model, but in a very different way. I think the hardest spot for us in pivoting is that we both love money. And so, we were very clear that we are going into this, yes, obviously to uplift women, but we are not doing it for free. So we're going to make money doing this. And so we put in a lot of money into it. And so to say, now scrap all of this, right? I mean, just the website alone was 5 figures, and the first figure was not one, US dollars. So, to put all of that to stop, so many hours spent on it and just building that out. I think that was the hard part when you are so invested in something, time, money, energy, you feel like you should make it work. So I think that was like maybe the hardest thing for us. We knew that when nobody wanted to sign up, that maybe we should start listening a little bit more closely now. I think the other thing that we didn't want to admit to ourselves was that we weren't really finding joy in like organizing events or curating things or like all these ideas we had. It wasn't really things that were lighting us up from the inside. The ultimate mission is. And so like the everyday work that you do, yes, there are things that you don't enjoy doing. I do not like doing our P&L at the end of every year and doing all the accounting, but that's just part of what we have to do. I'm talking about just the, the before, during, and after of planning for something. It didn't really give us as much joy as we'd like to admit. So that was the other sign that we looked out for. A lot of people say that first businesses fail. I don't know what that means really, but maybe this was our first business that failed. We'd like to see it as a pivot because we think we are going to come back to this very same idea, but the way that we would build it will be so different to the original. And the original idea was actually off the back of what already existed in the United States that didn't exist in Asia. And maybe there's going to be another way to build it. So yeah, I think it's important to fail. I think it's so important in year 1 to fail multiple times. I think it's important to fail continuously, just not make the same mistakes so that you can continue to evolve. So we're always looking now for signs. I think the first year of just knowing this is not going to work for us is now teaching us to like watch for signs even faster and have our antennas always up and ask questions early instead of keep trying to pull the thread on stuff. So the Elevate group today still has an aspect of the private network with only founding members. So we changed the model a little bit. We have a B2B where we provide consulting and services all about uplifting women in the workplace. And this year we launched our B2C model, which delivers digital courses courses, including cohorts, group coaching, one-on-ones, etc., to women around the world. So, we have products from $7 to just under $4,000, and we've had over 1,000 customers to date, and we're really, really happy with where we are ending up year 2, and we want to see where we can take this year 3 onwards. There was a lot of stuff that I had read when I was in the corporate world about entrepreneurship, just stuff like you need to hustle all the time. And I remember going into this full time and thinking, you know what, I'm going to do this differently. Like, I'm going to hustle my way. I'm going to only work 3 days a week. And I was very wrong about that. I am working more than ever. I'm sleeping later. I have just found that in order to build what you want to build, you got to obsess over the smallest thing. You got to keep learning all the time. All the stuff that I enjoy doing, but I had to let go of, okay, I'm only going to work 3 days a week. And, just for me, it's not going to work out that way. I do have to give it a lot of time and attention and energy. So that part of it was true. There's also stuff about, you should pursue your passion and be an entrepreneur and do what you love. I think you should do that if you have money, and absolutely do that. Otherwise, maybe consider different business models. But when you have money, I think you can make very different business calls. I mean, it's not like we don't need the money. We just don't need it now. So the way that we're building is very different. I think the other thing about entrepreneurship is, I think the most underrated skill, which I hear from people like Stephen Bartlett, he says is the number one thing, which I got to ask him in person about this, is people. You are rarely working on your own, even though you might be a solopreneur or you have a partner. There are people around you in your ecosystem that you are depending on to contribute to the work that you're doing. Those people, figuring out who they are, and do you invite them into your world, motivating them and making sure there is always value exchange and you respect each other, you want to work, you want to hustle, you want to work hard. Just those values. It takes a lot of time to find those people. I will say that in the first year, we spent a lot of money on people who didn't work out for us. And I think it's important to go through that so that you do know what kind of people you want to invite after that. So people, I think, is so important. And entrepreneurs who don't have people management skills or hiring talent, looking at talent, nurturing talent, and just the everyday thing of giving transparent feedback, communication skills, all of that, like people who don't have that experience, I think will fall behind in entrepreneurship, because you're going to work with contractors, etc., people you're going to outsource things to. And that, if you have that skill, I think it's magic what you can do. So the biggest difference for me leaving corporate and going into entrepreneurship is the flexibility of time. It's really true what they say about that. The freedom, that it's a different kind of freedom where, for example, Monday mornings for me used to be very stressful. I would spend all of my Sunday working so that Monday morning I can wake up with all emails already answered. I would be looking out at my inbox 8 o'clock. I'd be getting 3 forecast files, and then I'm going to run forecast calls with my team. And then I get into a senior leadership forecast call at 12. I'd be having my lunch at 11:30 at my desk. So that's what Monday mornings looked like to me. And I have intentionally now made sure that my Monday mornings are now free until after lunch. So I get to design that part of my life. And I think you get to decide on things like that. Everyone has different ways of getting things done. Some things take long, some things take short time. So you decide how to, do your schedule. I time block everything. So every single action is time blocked on my calendar. And then I look at it every day and prioritize and see what I need to move out or change, etc. So you do have to motivate yourself. That's why it's so important to work on the stuff that you love and believe in. You're not really answering to anybody. You're answering to yourself, right? And I think this desire to, as long as you know what your measure of success is that making X amount of revenue? Is that getting X amount of customers? Is that launching the first product? I think there are waves of different measurements throughout it. Some people also ask, failing in corporate versus failing in entrepreneurship is very different. There's a big safety net in corporate that you can maybe fail as much as you like. I'm not talking about performance issues here, right? I'm just talking about making mistakes. Sometimes it's monetary, you lose a customer. Sometimes it's legal issues, whatever. There's a safety net of a bigger logo behind you. There are people who can come and give you advice and all of that, right? And in entrepreneurship, it's just you. So I kind of think of it as, how do you fail well? I think it's important to fail. And when you have your own business, how do you fail well? I think the huge shift from our original idea that we wanted to launch with is a great example of failing well, right? That didn't come true. So that's really us failing well. We also failed on many other things, like giving a lot of money to people who didn't get the stuff that we wanted done for us, and spending money in all the wrong places. All of those things are failing well. Yes, it comes with a cost, and you ultimately answer to yourself. I think I'm blessed that I have a great business partner, so we hold each other accountable, and we've arrived at this rhythm that somehow, like, she, will take on some things and then I automatically adjust, and sometimes she's busy, so I'll take over. It's nice that you're building it with somebody. So I have always been asked, shouldn't I be building on my own? And I've always maintained that I should not, because I have very specific criteria about how I work, etc. But I think there's a lot to be said about having a partner that's doing it with you. Now, what about the definition of success? Now, in the corporate world, I was in sales, so it was pretty clear. Meet the numbers, and that is success. There are other measurements, of course, customer satisfaction, your team attrition rate, etc. When you're a leader, there are other metrics to check the box on. For us now, we get to define that. And one of the best things that Jingjin and I did, we had a set, like a founder's agreement about how do we want to really approach this business. So we wrote like a set of rules for ourselves. For example, one of it is that we will always build the business around our lifestyle. Like, we know that things will change. For example, for the Elevate group, Jingjin just left Singapore to move to Germany, right? So things will shift with that. Now, I don't know if, I'm going to change countries at some point. Things happen in life. And so it's so important that we build a business around our lifestyle. And that's why we pivoted to a digital model, so that we can be anywhere in the world and still serve our customers. We stop trading time for money. That's eventually kind of like the model we are evolving to. So kind of a very different definition of success. Can we stop trading time for money and have the business work for us even when we are sleeping? And so that was part of our definition of success. Are we living the life that we want to live, and we're not feeling constrained or annoyed or like, why do we have to give so much hours or do this thing? I think like all those things are a litmus test of whether or not we are really enjoying what we built. Like, we just talked yesterday on text. She was like, oh yeah, I just downloaded our year to date and here it is. And it's like, oh my God, like, we've done a lot. So we were like virtual high-fiving. So I think the day that we stop feeling that is when we know, like, okay, let's take a pause and check in. One of the biggest shifts I've had to learn was my relationship with money. And I talked a little bit about defining my rich life as one of the 10 questions I asked myself. I think the best exercise I did as I went into being made redundant was doing my own P&L. And doing your own P&L is easy. You first start off by, just for 30 days, documenting every single thing that you spend your money on. It doesn't matter how small or how big. I never did that, so I actually don't know how much money I was spending a month. And then I started doing that and, realized where all the money was going. The second thing I did was, as part of that exercise, looked at my credit card bill, which I generally don't pay attention to, because when you have a corporate paycheck, you just pay the credit card bill and move on. And then I noticed like all these subscriptions that I was paying for that I wasn't using. So I stopped all of that and I did my own profit and loss statement. And I did 3 versions of it. Like, if I was living my rich life, this is how much money I need a month. And then if I absolutely need to live bare minimum, how much would I need a month? That's what gave me the comfort to kind of figure out, okay, here's my runway. And I built in a lot of buffers. I do get nervous every month when I'm paying off all my bills and paying my credit card bill, and the bank account keeps lowering on the amount. And I'm trying to figure out, investing money on one side, but keeping enough cash to make all the payments. I mean, I never thought that I would have to live and check money month by month, but I'm at that stage now. So I'm also at that stage where I'm getting nervous and wondering like, okay, how much money is going to come out of everything that I'm doing on my own? Elevate is one part of it. So, yeah, I'm still working through my relationship with money, but I remember very specifically the first experience was when I ran out of toothpaste and my helper was saying to me that she needed to go buy new toothpaste for me because I ran out. And I said to her, like we have this travel drawer where I collected from all the hotels that I traveled to during my corporate travel time, all the mini items, and I had like a bunch of mini toothpaste, and I was like, let's just use that. We do not need to buy new toothpaste. And then I took out my phone and I was looking at which friend am I visiting that week. And I remember saying to myself, I bet they've got toothpaste, so I don't need to buy toothpaste. And I tell this story to my best friend, and she says, this is ridiculous. It's like you are telling the universe that you do not have enough money to buy toothpaste. So you need to go and buy the nicest toothpaste you want for yourself, because you're sending this message to the universe of scarcity instead of abundance. So I'm always in this push and pull of scarcity and abundance, and I hope I'm now more abundance than scarcity, but it's an ongoing thing with money, you know. Although I feel like I have enough of it, but I feel like there isn't enough. When I left the corporate world, I had no idea what I was going to do next. And one of the best exercises that I used was the Ikigai exercise. I had read the book. I had done some form of it, and I think the exercise is useful at many points in your life, so you don't just do it once. And it came as a reminder to me when I met Chris Do here in Singapore in his workshop. I bought the VIP workshop to ask Chris one question. Chris, I am passionate about these 10 things. I don't know how to bring them all together. That's when he said like, okay, and he did a little workshop whiteboard with me, and I had a lot of homework to do after that. So I used Ikigai, which is what do you find joy in doing? You feel really good. What are you great at? What is it that the world needs, and what can you be paid for? And I did all of that, and given my tech background, I used AI to help me. So I put it all into ChatGPT, and I went back and forth. I refined it. I spent days, a couple of weeks on it. I even asked friends to help me with it because sometimes they can see what you can't see. And I put everything and decoded it into GPT. I looked through like the output, and there was like 5 options, and I go back to Chris and I said like, okay, Chris, like what do I do now? Like this, all these options. And he asked a great question. Which one of this resonates the most, that when you look at it, it excites you the most? And I said, number 5. Chris nailed it. He texted me back and he said, it sounds to me like you are going to build a media company. And I said, a media company? And he said, yeah, kind of like Oprah with Harpo Productions and Martha with Omni Media. They build an ecosystem. They have a show, they have a book, they have products, they all work for each other in an ecosystem. And I thought, wow, like Chris was just looking into my soul, and he just knew this because I've been manifesting like Oprah for the longest time. And so when he said that, I just felt like, okay, like it's just all coming together. It was such a special, defining, validating moment for me. And so I'm on this path now to build, I don't know what it's called. It's like Uma Inc. And it's an ecosystem of companies. Elevate is just a part of it. I'm on the journey to just figure it all out. And so what building the Elevate group and Uma Inc. taught me is that reinvention isn't linear. It's messy, it's humbling, it's full of pivots, but surviving the messy middle is only the start. The next step for me was discovering parts of myself that I didn't even know existed. And so in the next episode, I want to share with you how I uncovered this whole other creative side that I thought was long gone for myself, and how that unlocked a completely new kind of freedom for me. Thank you for listening to Raw, for sitting with me in the messy, unfinished, beautiful middle. If something in this episode resonated, I'd love if you could follow and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Instagram. It's Raw with Uma everywhere. If you could leave a rating on Spotify, that helps keep the podcast free for listeners. And if you can, share this with one other person that might find this useful today, because the conversations we need most often start one-to-one. Have you got a question or thought you'd like me to unpack in a future episode? Drop it in the YouTube comments and I'll bring it into conversation. I'm Uma, and this is Raw.